At a bar in Los Angeles, pilot Rich is doing karaoke to celebrate his final flight before retirement. At the hotel, First Officer Ben gets a call from his wife, who is upset because he isn't going home as promised. Ben explains that the schedule changed, so his wife reminds him that their son is sick and Ben hasn't been around lately. It turns out Ben is deliberately scheduling specific flights to avoid going home. The next morning at the airport, Dan is scolded for smoking, yet he lights a second cigarette when the employee leaves. His tablet is running low on battery, so he connects it to a power bank and tosses them in his suitcase. When he checks in, he's asked if his suitcase has any batteries and he says no. Meanwhile, Ben overhears Cora say she's afraid of flying and her father Declan fails to comfort her. Ben tries to explain that there are more dangerous things than flying, but Cora only answers with sass and sarcasm. After Ben leaves, Cora's stepmother Jaya puts a tracker on her son Finn and sets up a tracking app on the phone with Finn's birthday as the password. At the gate, esports player Louie accidentally bumps into Hutch, a wrestler who keeps making fun of gamers. Hutch starts harassing Louie and only gets more excited when she calls him out. Team leader Sam comes to her defense, but before things can escalate, Hutch's coach drags him away. When Sam and Louie try to board the plane, Dan cuts in line. In the cockpit, Ben reads in the technical report that a fan isn't working well and says they shouldn't depart until it's fixed. Rich presses a button to reset that fan and decides they shall depart anyway. When Ben does extra checks on the flaps, Rich scolds him for overthinking. After the plane takes off, Rich says that he thought Ben wanted to punch him for his scolding. That's what got him kicked out of the Air Force and why he hasn't made it to captain despite his age, but at least they can joke about it. Sometime later the plane is shaken by some turbulence, but it only lasts a second. Matt keeps staring at flight attendant Zoe, but Becky tells him he has no chance because he's a 5 and Zoe is a 9. Meanwhile, Sam tells Lily that they almost lost their last game because of all her planning. They won in the end, but they need to work as a team. Lily also asks him why he's afraid of reading her letter, so Sam promises to do so when they land. Then Sam goes to the bathroom and stares at Lily's letter with mixed feelings. Later Declan tells Cora to be nicer to her new family, but she ignores him. When he and Jaya start kissing, Cora makes gagging noises. Then the couple goes to the bathroom together to get naughty. When Finn's tablet runs out of battery, he looks for his mother, so Cora tells him that they're in the pool at the end of the plane. Finn goes looking for them only to get lost. Matt notices this and invites Finn to sit with him to show him a game. After a few minutes, Cora feels alone and goes to knock on the bathroom door. In the cargo hold, Dan's power bank starts to heat up and soon it catches on fire, which quickly spreads to other bags in the container. An alarm rings in the cockpit, so Ben activates the fire suppression system, but it isn't working well. Then he calls traffic control and gets permission to land at the nearest airport. 2 crew members enter the cargo hold and try to put out the fire, but their extinguishers aren't enough and the flames grow. When the plane suddenly shakes and tilts, the container rolls down and crashes into some gas tanks. A small explosion fills the room with fire and causes a tank to be shot through the wall, breaking the pressure. As the plane starts falling at great speed, a tank bursts through the floor into the cabin and bounces all over the plane, killing a passenger by hitting him in the head. The shaking causes Jaya and Declan to slam their heads on the bathroom mirror. The cabin loses pressure too and objects start flying, hurting several people. Cora is almost blown out of the plane, but Lily catches her just in time. Everyone puts on the oxygen masks except for Declan and Jaya, who are unconscious. After some effort and several minutes of turbulence, Rich manages to stabilize the plane by staying at a safe altitude. He then informs the passengers about the fire and asks them to stay calm while they divert to the Guam airport. Sam comes out of the bathroom and tries to return to Lily, but Zoe makes him take a random seat because it's too dangerous to move around. While she's distracted, Dan sneaks to the bathroom to smoke. Cora wants to go looking for her parents, however Lily forces her to stay. Suddenly the container in the cargo hold is sucked out of the plane through the hole left by the explosion and it hits an engine, setting it on fire. While everyone panics, Zoe sends Dan back to his seat. Soon the burning engine is blown away and makes a hole in the cabin wall, so many passengers are blown away too with their seats. In the cockpit, Ben notices that they've lost half of the system instruments. He calls air traffic again to ask for a closer airport, but there's nothing in the area. As passengers struggle to hold on, Cora runs to look for her father but is caught by flight attendant Penny. The second engine is starting to catch on fire too, and the cockpit loses the rest of the instruments before the power shuts down. The pilots activate the ram air turbine, which acts as a backup source of power. However, this isn't enough for a reliable to dive for more speed, so they dump all the fuel. Then Rich tells the passengers to brace for impact, and the crowd begins to cry and pray. As the plane descends dangerously fast, Ben and Rich argue over what technique to use to land. When Ben points out the possibility of a cartwheel, Rich finally agrees to do it his way. Rich concentrates on the mission, using all his knowledge and experience to keep the plane under control. Thanks to Rich's effort, the plane successfully lands on the water. However, it keeps sliding and soon is hit by a coral reef. The plane is split into several parts and people get hurt or killed by the debris before a huge wave violently bursts into the cabin, flooding it and killing even more people. Seconds later, debris, flames, and bodies are floating on the ocean. A few people have managed to survive and keep screaming for help. Lily swims until she manages to hold on to some debris. Suddenly a shark grabs her leg and pulls her back into the water. Lily struggles until she manages to free herself and climb onto a plain piece. She has a breakdown when she sees the scar the shark left on her leg. Noticing that the metal is sinking, she walks away from the water. In the cockpit, Ben tries to wake up Rich, saying they would have won if it hadn't been because of a coral reef. At that moment the windows begin to crack. Penny tells Cora to wait and rushes to the cockpit to help Ben free Rich from his chair. When they pull, Rich wakes up to scream in pain because his leg is pinned by a piece of metal. Ben tries using an emergency axe to remove the metal to no avail and notices that Rich is bleeding too much. Rich accepts that this is the end, so he has a heartfelt goodbye with Penny and Ben before sending them away. After locking the door, Ben and Penny find a wounded flight attendant and free her from the seat. In the meantime, Rich holds a family picture and sings his favorite song until the windows breaks. The water kills him as soon as it comes in. Some of it also opens the door and makes the others fall. Ben bandages the unconscious attendant with his tie and tells Penny they must look for survivors. In the bathroom, J.O. wakes up and immediately awakens Declan too. He panics and opens the door, so water quickly floods the room. Meanwhile the plane's tail is upright and slowly flooding. Matt yells for help and the only one who answers is Zoe, who throws in the flashlight. While Matt frees Finn from the seatbelt, Zoe starts going down. The bodies keep startling her and she slips a few times but eventually she reaches the bottom. Matt and Zoe notice that Becky is only unconscious, so they yell at her until she wakes up. Now the group has to climb up to avoid the rising water. When they get to the top, Matt almost opens the door, but Zoe stops him and explains they're in an air bubble, so breaking the seal would make this plane session sink. While Zoe bandages Matt's hand, Finn begins to hyperventilate, so Becky comforts him and distracts him by talking about his family. Unfortunately the plane shakes when it slips on the coral, so Finn panics again. In the cockpit, Ben wonders if they could find the emergency locator transmitter, which is in the midsection. Penny shares that she's a champion swimmer and volunteers to go looking for it. A few minutes after Penny leaves, Cora is horrified to see a shark in the water and alerts Ben. They both start yelling to warn Penny, but she's too far to hear anything. Ben activates an emergency life raft and gives Cora the only life jacket before they get on the raft to go after Penny. The shark is already swimming around her, so by the time the raft gets close enough it's too late. The shark bites Penny's leg and drags her underwater. After some struggle Penny manages to resurface, but the shark keeps dragging her down. Ben reaches for her and tries to bring her aboard, however the shark bites her again and tears her body in half. Then the shark jumps high enough to land on the raft, so Ben desperately hits it with a paddle until it leaves. In the plane's midsection, most seats have dead bodies. Sam searches for Lily, but he only finds blood on her seat. The survivors gather at the hull to analyze the situation and the weight causes the plane to slip, since it's precariously perched on the coral reef. The shaking makes a woman fall into the water. Thankfully Jim quickly brings her back. Sam tries to tell everyone that they need to move back and distribute the weight, but Hutch thinks he's sending them to the water and an argument ensues. Jim has to separate them, and Hutch shuts up when his coach and teammate also agree with Sam. While the midsection survivors start moving to the other seats, Lily's base finally finishes sinking. She has no choice but to jump into the water and swim. She reaches the midsection and startles the coach when she resurfaces. Then she runs to hug Sam. While they're distracted, the shark gets close enough to capture the coach and drag him into the water. The man struggles and his blood dyes the water red, so Hutch's teammate gets in the water to try to help him. Hutch also wants to help, but Jim holds him back. Unfortunately, fighting back isn't enough and the shark quickly kills both the coach and team. Afterward Hutch blames these deaths on Sam's plan and jumps on him to start beating him up. When Jim tries to separate them, he gets punched too. At that moment Ben arrives and pulls Hutch back, telling him to keep his cool if he wants to live. In the tail, Zoe says they don't have much air left. Matt points out that if they stay there nobody will rescue them, so he volunteers to go out. He dives in and swims as fast as possible, dodging bodies in the way. His shirt gets stuck in some debris but he releases it fast and manages to swim to the surface. While he yells for help, he's startled by a hand on his shoulder. It's Declan, who is floating on a door with Jaya's body. Declan says Cora's name before a shark jumps out of the water to devour him. In the midsession, Ben guides the survivors to find life jackets and a second raft. Then he searches the storage bins until he finds the transmitter, only to accidentally drop one of the antennas. Thankfully he retrieves it quickly by diving. While everyone gets on the raft, Ben turns the transmitter on and gets ready to leave too, only to notice that Cora is near the hole looking for her father. He gives the transmitter to Dan and runs to grab Cora, picking her up just in time to save her from a jumping shark. Suddenly the plane shifts on the reef again, and a ferocious wave bursts into the cabin, pushing several people into the water. Dan is so desperate to climb back up that he drops the transmitter in the process. While Jim helps Ben and Cora, Sam holds onto a suitcase. He notices an unconscious Hutch nearby and swims toward him to rescue him. As Sam yells for help, two sharks begin swimming around the boys. On the raft, Ben asks about the transmitter and gets angry when Dan confesses he dropped it. but he also says that it was Ben's responsibility. When they hear Sam screams, Ben wants to help him, but Dan refuses to move the raft and thinks Ben just wants to feel better after crashing the plane. Then Dan punches Ben, who immediately punches him back and announces they're helping the boys. Dan wants to move to the other raft, but the crowd doesn't let him and insults him. Then in Jim row as fast as possible and the raft soon reaches the boys. They bring them aboard right before a shark tries to attack them. In the tail, the group hears creaking and Zoe decides it's time to leave, so she gets life jackets for Finn and herself. Becky is too old and injured to swim now, but Zoe promises to come back for her. Finn and Zoe dive in and swim through the cabin, losing a bit of air when they're startled by a body. Thankfully they still manage to reach the surface, only to see Matt's body floating nearby. There's also a raft queue, so Zoe activates it to release the raft. When she's about to put Finn on it, a shark bites her and drags her underwater. After some struggle, Zoe swims fast enough to reunite with Finn and together they finally get on the raft. Unfortunately Zoe passes out from blood loss. As Finn keeps yelling for help, a shark starts slamming into the raft until all the shaking causes Finn to fall back into the water. On the other rafts, Lily hears a noise and looks up to see a plane. Everyone starts yelling and shaking their arms, but the plane just flies away. After a few hours, the water level in the tail is almost finished flooding it. Becky realizes she won't survive, so she looks at her granddaughter's picture to say goodbye and thank her for filling her life with joy. By nighttime, a rescue helicopter starts searching the area. They detect a Chinese fishing trawler nearby, so they call the crew to ask for their help. On the rafts, Hutch thanks Sam for saving him and advises him to confess his feelings to Lily. Sam explains that the rules don't allow teammates to date each other, but Hutch claims that nobody listens to that rule. Cora is sad because she lost her family, so Ben assures her that they'll always be with her. He shows her a picture of his own family, but it's really old. At that moment the helicopter finally finds them, so Ben shoots some flares for better visibility. Then a diver starts descending, so the group tries to warn them about the sharks. Unfortunately the diver can't hear them and reaches the water, where she's immediately attacked. The helicopter tries to pull her out but can't do it until the shark lets go, so the diver comes out missing an arm and a leg. She's still so close to the water that the shark only needs a slight jump to capture her again. As the beast drags the diver underwater, the connecting rope pulls the helicopter too. The rope mechanism suddenly explodes and the chopper quickly crashes into the sea. The shockwave shakes the rafts and several people fall into the water as well. The survivors still on the rafts help the others climb back. Dan desperately grabs a woman's arms and ends up pushing her down as he gets in, so a shark quickly devours her. At that moment the fishing trawler appears nearby, so Ben shoots a flare to mark their location. Unfortunately the trawler has to stop moving because it can't cross the reef, so the survivors have to row. Sadly they lost the paddles during the chaos of helicopter crash. Then realizes that Cora is missing and everyone calls her name until Jim sees her standing on some big debris. Since it's clearly going to sink soon, Ben jumps into the water to help her. He swims as fast as possible and reaches Cora without issues. She says she doesn't want to leave because she doesn't want to abandon her father, so Ben reminds her that her dad would want her to be brave. The duo gets back in the water and starts swimming while the other survivors try to row with their hands. Soon the sharks surround them and Ben disappears underwater for a second, only to resurface and shoot a shark with a flare, killing it. Unfortunately this was the last flare. The captain of the trawler notices this and orders his crew to release all their catch. The sharks immediately turn around to feed on the fish instead. On the raft, Dan sees a pack of cigarettes floating and immediately grabs it. When he tries to smoke one, his lighter stops working. Suddenly a shark jumps out to catch him and brings him underwater to eat him. In the morning, the trawler has rescued all the survivors. Sam tells Lily that the water took her letter and he couldn't read it. Lily says he already knows what she meant anyway, but she can't deny the issue of the rules. After some hesitation, Sam kisses her forehead, and Lily kisses his cheek. Meanwhile Cora keeps mourning her family. When she hears the others finally getting reception on their phones, Cora borrows Ben's and uses the tracking app to find Finn's tracker. They immediately show it to the captain, who guides the trawler to the third raft. At first they only find Zoe, but she moves some plastic sheets to reveal Finn. The siblings reunite with a hug and tears, and Cora finally apologizes. Zoe asks about Becky, so Ben has to give her the bad news. Afterward Ben looks at more recent pictures of the son, revealing he has cancer. He has a breakdown and calls his family to announce he's going home.